Welcome to today's Dialogue for Change discussion. This is Invariant's 8th discussion, and today our focus is going to be on what the public and private sector can do to increase diversity, inclusion, and equality in the tech sector. My name is Penny Lee, and I lead the public affairs practice here at Invariant. At Invariant, we are privileged to represent Fortune 500 companies, national trade associations, nonprofits, and we represent over 30 companies founded by entrepreneurs who have gone on to raise $37 billion from venture capital. They range in stage from seed all the way through to IPO, and 8 of these companies have either been founded or are now currently led by women. But I also had a side hustle. For the last 8 years, I've also been an angel investor. For 3 years, I chaired K3 Capital, a Washington, D.C.-based angel group focused on investing in the regulated market space. As chair, I made it my mission to increase funding for female-identifying, LGBTQI, and BIPOC founders, those that I felt have been underrepresented for far too long. We did very simple things. For each pitch session, we insisted on a diversity of founders, because as I believe, and I think all of the panelists would agree, it is not a pipeline problem, but often just an exposure problem. We were pitched by some extraordinary founders with innovative and novel concepts, many who were passed over or never even given an opportunity to pitch, each trying to improve some aspect of our lives, from improving our healthcare delivery system, to making efficiencies within government services, to better data integration, to even helping with digital identification. After 3 years as chair, I am proud our portfolio represented 43% underrepresented founders and 32% female identifying founders. While it might take more effort, we all know that diversity and inclusion and equality can happen if there is will and intention, because this does not happen by accident. It is far too easy for all of us to stay in our own pods instead of asking, what else can we do? The 3 speakers joining us today are at the forefront, trying to make the technology ecosystem more inclusive. Their experience spans private companies, nonprofits, venture firms, and the public sector, each working to change behavior and outcomes. Unfortunately, we have all seen the statistics that haven't really moved much. Underrepresented founders have less access to capital. Only 2.3% of female-founded companies and 2.6% of Black or Latinx founders receive venture capital funding. Black entrepreneur loan requests are 3 times less likely to be approved than white entrepreneurs. New Black-owned businesses start with almost 3 times less in terms of overall capital compared with new white-owned businesses. They are also underrepresented at venture capital firms. Only 2% of senior executives at venture capital firms are Black. 68% do not have a female partner. Only 7% of board seats in private venture-backed US-based companies are held by women, and less than 2% by BIPOC individuals. Today, we hope to move beyond admiring the problem and actually offer solutions to policymakers and corporate leaders on what they can do to have the tech sector represent more of America. In appreciation for all of the panelists' participation, Invariant will be making contributions to each of their favorite charities: Black Girl Ventures, the Humane Society, and the Foundation for Puerto Rico. Now, I am pleased to introduce our esteemed panelists. First, we have Shelley Bell. Shelley is the founder and CEO of Black Girl Ventures. She is a computer scientist, system disruptor, venture capitalist, and business strategist. She is on the board of Malika and Colors of Crohn's and Chronic Illness, and founder of SheRaise.com. Agnes Dazovitz is the co-CEO of Small Enterprise Assistance Funds, a leader in impact investing in emerging and frontier markets. During the Obama administration, Agnes served as a director at USAID. In 2020, she helped lead the Kauffman Foundation's launch of the Capital Access Lab, an initiative to spur the formation of new financing to increase capital investments in underserved entrepreneurs. And lastly, but not least, Javier Say. He is the venture partner at Fenway Summer and managing partner at Impact Master Holdings. Javier also serves on the board of directors for SoftBank's SVF Investment Corp and chairman of the board at GP Funding. He was an associate administrator, chief of investment and innovation at the SBA, and served on the committee of small and emerging companies for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Today, to open up the panel, I invite each of our panelists to kind of level set and share a personal reflection on what the current inflection point in our nation's demand for racial justice means for the tech industry. Shelley, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny, and to the Invariant team for having us. You know, we're in a really interesting time. At BlackRock Ventures, we work on capital, capacity, and community. And one of the things that underrepresented founders face is lack of access to influential networks. And we find that those networks are where the capital typically comes from. So you didn't, the lack of generational capital, which you mentioned, uh, you don't have the rich uncle that you can kind of call on. My mom used her retirement to invest in my company prior to BlackRock Ventures, and I used my tax returns to build my print shop. That was the company I had prior to BlackRock Ventures. And so when I look around at like the awakening that's happening now, and the awareness that people have, I'm optimistic about what can happen. We're going to have to, there's lots to think about and lots to talk about. One of the things for sure is what I call bringing the fun, FUN, fundamental understanding of nuance. If we had DEI efforts before, we need to take a second look at them because they clearly were not hitting the mark. Thinking about how can we create new definitions. I think the pandemic has taught us that everything that we thought had to be does not have to. The way we, from laws to the way we get educated, to the way we move money, nothing that we thought was required actually is. And that we have a lot of power as a society to move and make shift into what really makes sense for today's America and not the America from 100 years ago.
Great. Agnes?
So I've really come at this from an international investment and development background because most of my prior career has been in delivering investment to businesses all over the world. And I think that in the US, we assume that we really don't need to help small businesses to the extent that we do internationally because the capital markets work. The capital markets really work for everyone. So if you have a great business idea, you're going to get funded. Well, now we know that's not the case, and that most entrepreneurs in the US, whether they're in the tech or not, tech business or not, basically do not get VC funding. They don't get funding from banks. There is actually not the system that can efficiently deliver small amounts of capital that are needed to support the formation and growth of small businesses. So I started looking at 2 years ago into this space and kind of thinking about what could we do that we do internationally to actually bring the types of assistance to small businesses in the US that they need. And the reason this is important and the reason diversity is important is because small businesses have been the engine of growth of the US economy. I mean, there's even research to suggest that frankly, it's women and minority-led businesses that have been the engine of growth of the US economy since World War II. So unless we really take a very deep look at how we deliver capital to small businesses in the US and how we increase the networks that deliver that capital to diverse and women-led businesses, we're not going to not only recover from the COVID crisis, but really continue the growth of our economy. So not only do we need to really develop a much better ecosystem, much better financial infrastructure to support small businesses, in particular, we need to focus that infrastructure on delivery of capital and all that capital brings, the networks, the value add services, the connections that you really need to grow your business in the US. So for me, I think I wanted to I've come at it from, we do this internationally and we believe in this internationally. We really need to do that more in the US through a partnership of the government with the private sector.
That's great. Javier?
Well, I think my biggest accomplishment of the day is that I took myself off of mute. And it sucks to go third, but I love the fact that I'm the only non-female on the panel, which says a lot about what is the future of America and what it should have been to begin with. I've had sort of a squiggly line career. And I've always typically been the only person that looks like me anywhere I go. I was the only Puerto Rican in my training class at Abbott Labs, where I started my career. I was the only Puerto Rican at Booz Allen. I was one of two Puerto Ricans at Harvard Business School. I was the only Puerto Rican at McKinsey. In investing, which is what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and I've started a few companies. I also happen to be the only person like that. And I never looked at myself as a minority, because when you come from a place like Puerto Rico, everybody's Hispanic. So I didn't realize it until I came to the States. But to the point of this talk, diversity, it's good we're talking about it. It's very bad we're talking about it. The point of this, I think, eventually is to get out of this discussion. There shouldn't be any more of the stats thrown around. In fact, women and minorities start businesses at double the rate, but when it's a woman and a minority, it's 4 times the rate of typical Americans. I ran programs at the SBA, which invest in venture capital and private equity funds, and those funds invested billions and billions of dollars in American small businesses. I was personally pushing very hard for it to be more, so it looked more like America, and it was very, very hard, because to get to the point where somebody is crazy enough to give you money to manage, you have to check a lot of boxes, and we've never had those opportunities. So now there are 3 things that are happening that I think are good, and we should try to figure out how to keep going. One, that we go from the talk of pipeline. We have the pipeline. Now focus on opportunity. So taking swings, let people take a swing. That's very hard. Number 2, giving the ability of the stats and the numbers to speak for themselves. And to do that, you need allies. So we're not going to do this by ourselves. We need white males, which still vastly control the world, to get on board. And we are going to keep having these echo chambers and things like that. But it's not until because when we get to the seats we are in, it's because typically if you're a woman or person of color, you have to run twice as fast. And that's a double burden. So you're still going to want to run twice as fast because it's a competitive world, but not just to stay even. If you're running twice as fast, you want to be, you would have wanted to run twice the distance. And the third thing, which is encouraging, I served on the Biden transition team on the Treasury landing team and looking at a lot of this stuff in the economy. And one of the pillars of the new president's agenda doesn't say diversity, doesn't say inclusion, it says equity. And equity, as we're seeing with the Robin Hood debacle in real time, like right now in the Hill, to equity in terms of being at the table is the goal. Diversity is a method to achieve it. So how do you embed that in the systems and the infrastructure that underpins our amazing economy? And a big part of that economy is the innovation economy, which is what we're talking about here. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for hosting the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all again for being here and for these reflections. You know, Shelley, you know, one of the reasons why you founded Black Girl Ventures, which you alluded to earlier, was this lack of access and this lack of access to capital for so many. And, you know, what Javier was just alluding to, there is a large swath of the white man that still controls many of these access points in capital. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen, because you've really kind of seen almost a little bit of a sea shift since the George Floyd murder. and you have had the more engagement from corporations and others with the large sums of capital. Can you tell us a little bit of kind of, have you seen those, what do you think caused that shift and all of a sudden that investment in your community and kind of the work in which you're doing?
Yeah, Javier said so many great things that I wanted to, that I would love to talk about. I think I love the idea of moving away from, one, where diversity is about making money. So, right, like it's about your portfolio, it's about diversifying how you invest. Like that's the way we should be talking about it. And if we were talking about it that way, then I think that it should be more viable. It's not a social thing to do. In fact, diversifying is actually it's an economic development tool. So, I 100% agree with that. I think what I think happened, to be just, completely transparent, is that it was undeniable. George Floyd's murder was undeniable. I think so many times people have told themselves, well, if the cop did that, something had to happen. It was like, somebody had to do something. Maybe it's just something we didn't see. This was so, no matter what that man did, he just did not deserve that to that, like that extent. Really just put like this reality in front of people of just like, yeah, there are people who are out here who have their foot on each other's necks, whether economically, whether literally, like physically, and it's not all good. They must have just not done something. I mean, historically speaking, Black people have only been able to generate wealth without, like, uninterrupted for maybe the last 60 years. And if you count subprime lending, then we're talking about 10 years. So I think like history has not been favorable to Black communities. I would also say that history also includes the moments where certain windows opened up and then Black people ran through them. And I think like that is exactly what is happening now. If you look at even it has taken an act of Congress for Black people to get any rights over the course of our existence in America. And that is a huge reality that we don't honor even in Black History Month. The fact that like, hey, we know the companies aren't there yet. We haven't had time. If you stop blowing us up, maybe we'll get somewhere. So when you look at like A.G. Gaston, who is, well known, a very, very successful Black man entrepreneur. S.B. Fuller, also very successful Black man entrepreneur. Madam C.J. Walker. Even then, for whatever reason in America, we talk about today as if like it's the only thing that's happening. But like this has been happening, and the hindrance legally, the legal disadvantaging of people, it has been the challenge. So I'm wondering, what are we going to do from a policy standpoint from here that really addresses the fact that I don't want to go back to the norm. I want us to sit in this discomfort and say, what do we need to do from here? Not what do we used to do that we can do again and how we're going to do it again. Because I think that would be a huge misstep. That does have us returning to diversity and inclusion efforts versus equity efforts. That has us returning to, kind of like the bottlenecking of the capital versus true innovation. So yeah, I can talk all night about it, but I'm a serial optimist. I will say that as well. So I'm also optimistic about what is to come. But I would just say I can't speak for the entire Black community, but from what we talk about and what I've heard, we're kind of like about time. Like, hey, we've been over here doing a thing. Did you not know? Listening to, Javier talk about being the only one and like, hey, this has been happening. So it's just really great, unfortunately, to see people have to, wake up to it.
And have you seen an example of an engagement? Can you talk about an engagement that has actually worked out well since George Floyd, and kind of what was it that made it effective?
I mean, I could use Black Girl Ventures as an example. I mean, a lot of people have been asking me, like, do you think it's performative? Do you think, what the corporations are doing or the VCs are doing is performative? I can't speak for what everybody's doing. What I can speak toward is the companies that came to us we're really human. And that's what I push for as a leader. Like, I want to have a human conversation about how we create human impact. Creating Black Girl Ventures was me saying, I'm not going to wait for everybody else. We activate people to actually donate through this crowdfunding pitch competition. So we circumvented the banks to an extent. We circumvented the VC world to an extent. We got capital directly to people legally using democracy, basically, right? And so I have seen where, like, let's take Visa, for example. We partnered with Visa. We took 9 businesses with us to the Super Bowl. Through the Super Bowl reveal, the NFL athlete Saquon from the New York Giants, who did the reveal, he listened to their stories and he's like, you know what? I'm going to invest my own capital. So then, like, capital came to them from that. Then Visa waived the transaction fees for their companies. Like, there's all kinds of ways to create access to capital, right? Waiving those transaction fees, that's a huge move for them. That frees up capital, right? And so now these businesses are also getting more customers, more traction based off of just being highlighted by Visa. So thinking about how we invest our social capital is something I think we need to think of deeper, because that's where the equity is going to come in. The money is where the money is, and it can move if the people with the influence to move it want to. So I think if we think deeper about how do we social capital, I'm not talking about, like, we don't all have to bind together and be friends if that's not what we're doing. But what we do have to do, and we are responsible for, is making a better society for all of us, including the children that will come after us.
Agnes, when you were at the Kauffman Foundation, this was also something that was very much a focus of their efforts as well, and trying to kind of bridge those gaps of the capital gap that is out there. What could you say were some of the barriers that you guys were trying to solve for, and what were some of the more successful ways in which to produce better outcomes?
So first of all, I totally agree with everything that Shelley just said, that a lot of it is about the people. So I just want to comment on that really quickly, and then I'll speak a little bit to additional barriers that I've seen, because through the work at Kauffman, I've spoken to entrepreneurs who were saying things like, a female entrepreneur who runs a small construction company in Baton Rouge was pretty much saying that when she went to the bank to get a loan, they asked her where her husband was. And this is in the US last year. You have things like in Cincinnati, the local chamber of commerce, who was trying to increase the procurement of large businesses from Cincinnati to include more Black-owned businesses. Basically, the leadership of those companies were saying, yes, we want to do that. We want to diversify our supply chains. The Chamber of Commerce was helping those businesses, but the middle managers, who have been working with certain suppliers for the entirety of their career, really had no incentive to change. Why would they change? Everything is going great. So these are the barriers that constantly exist for diverse businesses all over the US. What is really compounding that is the fact that the way US businesses are financed is not bank debt or VC. Here I'm talking about the vast majority of businesses. So I know that a lot of the audience on this call has been financed through VCs, but for a typical business out of Cincinnati, a VC firm is not an option, mainly because they're not going to become a unicorn. They really are not shooting for that valuation. And the VC investment model is based on looking for those unicorns. So it's really difficult to say, oh, we're just going to take Silicon Valley and transplant it over to Kansas, and we're going to finance entrepreneurs the same way. We actually have to rethink the way small businesses are financed. And there are people who are trying to finance small businesses. There are lots of small funds all over the US who are deploying capital that's not a typical loan, and that's not a typical VC investment. They're doing some sort of structures that are based on repayment through a percentage of company revenues or other ways, because they realize that the same way that a VC company is not going to finance some of these small businesses, banks are not either. And the reason the banks are is because, for example, a lot of diverse entrepreneurs don't have collateral required because they were not able to get a mortgage on a house. because of a lot of, for example, redlining issues that have existed in the US forever. So because they have not been privileged enough to really access a lot of capital early in their life, they do not have the assets right now to go to a bank and say, I want a loan from the bank, because the bank is going to have the requirements that they have. So I think supporting these new types of financiers, whether they be local investment funds, CDFIs, these community development finance institutions, or a lot of new fintech companies who have managed ways of being very efficient, delivering capital to small businesses based on things that are not your average credit score, I think is a really pathway forward. And there are lots of issues with fintech lending. We all know that lots of payday industry has moved into fintech lending. But frankly, there are lots of great companies that are trying to solve for this issue and figure out how do we deliver capital to small businesses more efficiently. And I think that's a way to potentially overcome some of the barriers that I've seen all over the US.
You know, Javier, you mentioned that you worked on the Biden transition, and the word that was used was equality versus diversity. And just wanted to pull on that thread a little bit about kind of maybe some of the recommendations, or to understand some of the recommendations that you all were putting forth. And do you think equality can be legislated or regulated?
Well, I think equality is in fact part of the Constitution. It has been amended many, many times. But back to whoever said the comment about people regulate, people enforce laws, people control access points. So to really, let me see how I put this, because I can't really talk about, it's like Fight Club. I was sworn to secrecy for a year about what we worked on, but I'm going to talk in general terms, specifically about the financial system. So if you think about banks, kind of when you talk to your mom about the financial system, she says, "Oh, the bank, right?" Let's start with the pillar of our the pillars of our financial system. They're basically highly leveraged balance sheets with our money deposits insured by us, the FDIC. And if you ask your mom how a bank works, she doesn't know. So if you think then about the incentive a bank has to, and the bigger they get, we know what happened in the 2008 crisis. Just before there were 7,000 banks, now there's 4,000. The largest 20 control 50% of the assets, about 12 trillion out of 21 trillion. And then you start kind of pulling on that thread, and then you realize that all of our systems are set up to, and this is not just the financial system and the capillaries of that system, which involve pension funds, which invest in venture capital funds, or banks, which invest in CDFIs, or philanthropy, which invented impact investing, and now it's become the coolest thing at BlackRock. So you have all of this stuff kind of brewing, but really it's about the capillaries of a main vein. So the way I think we were looking at it in the transition, and I think you're going to start seeing that as Secretary Yellen starts doing things, and the different regulators and folks in the economic side, is how do you increase the capacity of those capillaries, CDFIs, minority-owned funds, capacity, not increase the number, but the capacity, because if you increase the capacity, the numbers will come. Look at what's happening with special purpose acquisition vehicles. That's one example of what's happening in the capital markets now. The other thing, so that's kind of playing offense. On the defense side, how do you remove friction points? So to the point Agnes was making, well, if you have a 27-year veteran of XYZ, Midwest company that has always bought their bottles to bottle their juices from this particular company, they don't have an incentive. They have guardrails to not break glass. And if you don't have And if the guardrails don't allow you to break some glass, you're never going to change the system. So how do you remove friction points? And that's on the supply chain side, but then on the money management side and the entrepreneurial side, where the friction point of a person of color that's lucky enough to be the first person to go to college in their family is not willing to load up their credit card to start some crazy idea because they can't. So how do you then enable that entrepreneur, which may not have spent the summers in the Hamptons and the skiing in Aspen, all that stuff, and how do you remove friction points? So I think on the offense is how do you increase the capillaries that exist, which are pretty good. You need some new things. And then on the defense side, how do you remove friction? And those two things are so heavily influenced by inertia that inertia is the physics of inertia. You need a stronger force to break it. So we are in a moment in time now, sadly, because an innocent man got disproportionately punished and died. And this is visceral for me because I live in DC, and the only day I decided to join the peaceful protesters in the crowd was June 1st, which was the day that our previous president decided to do a photo op. So I was there, and I could not believe that, and this is again, talk about a friction point, right? So I am very hopeful about the direction they're gonna make a lot of mistakes, I'm sure, but the direction we're going, I think is really good. And the moment in time, I'm afraid is gonna get missed. And one more thing, I'll shut up. Shelley said something. The way I think about really a seat at the table is I think about a cookie and crumbs. So far, diversity, or how corporations think about diversity, or big pools of capital or big banks, is let's just set aside a little capital. That feels like crumbs to me. What we want is a chance to get the cookie. That's very difficult, but therein lies the solution, or the set of solutions. And the government is going to be, I think, critical part of that.
Great. And if any of the panelists want to jump in at any point, and feel free to comment on one another, because I think there's a brilliant analogy about, it really has been crumbs up to date. And I think we all have seen some examples, even in the post George Floyd, where some of the corporations or others stepping forward, while it's billed as magnanimous, it really has been, probably more crumbs than the actual cookie. That we can all speak to. Agnes, I don't know if you have something to say there.
Yeah, I'll tell you that it's not just the corporations, right? I mean, I did a review of government programs that are supposed to be supporting small businesses, which, by the way, Small Business Administration is one. Yeah. I've identified, and this was just a cursory review, like 72 across different agencies. Every single one of them is tiny compared to the budget of those agencies. I mean, Commerce runs some, Department of Energy, you name it. Everybody's got a small business support program. They're really small. And what's even worse is there is always like a tiny allocation for some sort of diverse businesses. So you have like a $5 billion program, and then you have, and this 5 million will be for small business, for diverse businesses. It's really crumbs. And it's shocking when you actually put it all in one spreadsheet like I did to see. It's almost like a little crumb. Meanwhile, I know that, women have started in 2018, women started over 2,000 businesses a day, and 65% of those businesses were started by Black women. I mean, and they're getting the little crumbs that are falling from these programs, right? So it's really, can you imagine what they would do if they were getting the cookie?
I want to say one more thing. Whitney Wolfe Herd. She killed a lot of things along the way, and there she was a couple of days ago with her kid ringing the bell. For her to get there, she had a knife in her mouth and had to kill all kinds of things. So yeah, and that's one of 3 women out of 600 companies that have gone public in the last 3 years. 3, right? So that's not just crumbs, it's crummy.
Shelley, did you?
And to talk about just like some of those effects, Bumble has been a major partner for us, funded us. We also have a connection to them for our investment pool. So if we send them companies every month, like, so, I mean, like that, look at the power of women engaging and being able to engage and having that capacity, and that those cookies are super, super important, because it just create, but we know this, right? See, this is the part that, like, we know this. All the stats say invest in women. All the stats say you need a diverse board. So at some point, I just can't figure out for the life of me how we can send a car to Mars, but we can't figure out how to diversify. We can't figure out equity. Come on. It really comes down to this human part that we have yet to have a deeper conversation about in our country. So somebody asked me, do you want to change the way people think, or do you want to change the way people act? If you want to change the way people think, you can be, if you want to change the way people think, you could be provocative. You can throw out some nice taglines. You can have some 3-word rebellions. But if you want to change the way people act, you have to be clear. You have to be concise. You have to be defined, because where you're thinking may not match up with the way I need you to act, but with the way I need you to act has to match up with the equity that we're trying to create in the world. Right. And it's such a thing that I think we battle. There's a battle between that all the time, which is why the DEI initiatives get the least funding and they go in the opposite direction from innovation sometimes. Is I think that the social challenge is one we don't want to have the conversation about, because we can't always figure out, do we want to impress upon people's real thoughts as a human being, what they grew up with, what they want to do, don't want to do? Or do we actually just want to shape how they act? And I think like it's a bit of both, but we haven't been addressing it head on, that like there's some thinking out there that's actually keeping these things bogged down and tied up. And then there's some actions out there that have been these things bogged down and tied up. And I don't know that we need them to change the way so that they act different, because we keep assuming that that's what will happen. We assume that if you think different, you'll act different. And those things aren't always matching up. I think that's the battle we're having when it comes to policy. I think that's the battle we're having. So when you ask the question, Penny, around like, do we think we can create policies that makes things more equitable? Again, I'm a serial optimist. So I'm hopeful that we can. And I'm wondering, are those policies geared toward the way people act or the way people think? And do we have the right mix of both in order to see change happen and be sustainable?
Well, one of those I'd open it up to the group is mandates. Do mandates make sense? Should it be mandated? California has mandated that every board, have a diverse, either a female and a diverse member of their board to be domiciled there in California. Goldman Sachs has mandated, that they will not take a company public unless it has a diverse board. Should the government put those kind of mandates? Because we haven't seen, behavioral change all that much. Are mandates necessary?
It's a blunt hammer to solve a problem. And when Goldman did that, people took notice. And in fact, they're not doing it because their kindness from their heart, is because they make 6% on every IPO. Let's be very clear. The AB 9 you're talking about in California started with one woman on the board, and then it became AB 979, which is one woman, one person of color, and then if depending on the number. And then NASDAQ just did a similar thing. Without that, I don't think you break inertia. So I think the blunt hammer is sadly needed. I serve on 2 public company boards, and you were talking about the numbers. I should feel special that I'm one of whatever. I mean, in Latinos, 770 of the Fortune 1000 don't have one Latino on the board. 770. And we're 19% of the population, soon to be 30%. If you take Black women, African Americans, and Latinos put together, which are, when you add them all up, 70% of the population, they only hold 16% of the boards, and yet we're the ones buying this stuff. So there is a significant amount of reasoning and logic behind the blunt hammers. The problem with the blunt hammers is that the free market folks will say, well, let the best people win, right? Well, it's a capitalist society. Let the best people win. The strongest survive. If everything was efficient, that is true, but we know everything's not efficient. So sometimes you need these blunt hammers. That's my perspective.
Agnes, do you think mandates work?
I like incentives, right? And the reason because as Javier was saying, I mean, mandates can go both ways. I have stories of companies in California that put their secretaries on the board just because they had to have one, and they wanted to have someone whose name they can use, but actually they didn't want that person to participate in discussions, right? That's an actual case. I'm not going to name the company or anyone, but I will tell you, so it could go, the reason I like incentives is because I think that, when you look at how you need decision makers in place who can make the change. So by mandating a woman on the board, you might not get that decision maker in place. So you really need to incentivize companies to put women and minorities, people of color, diversity into every layer of decision making. And the way you could do that is really incentivize that behavior. And for example, the government can incentivize that behavior by passing all kinds of, I'm going to stay away from tax breaks, but all kinds of other incentives. Actually, large investors like pension funds, who are all saying they're looking for diversity and ESG and so on, they can incentivize that behavior by actually prioritizing companies that have diverse management over their boards, and not just kind of saying that, it'd be great if you have it, but actually maybe we give you a better valuation because you have that, right? So this is all about, I've learned that it's really, money talks, right? So if you can actually provide financial incentives for people to act differently, especially the kind of people that are used to listening to money, that they will. And I think that that's a little bit of an easier, more gentle approach than mandates.
On the money talks, just one thing, Agnes, on the money talks, there's been study after study that one woman on the board, just one woman on the board generates 1%, which doesn't sound like much, 1% additional return on invested capital. And that every additional woman on the board is another 1.5% on return on capital. By the way, capital levered you're talking about 10, 20, 30%. So the math alone is not necessarily working. So anyway, just a point.
No, 100%. I was going to say that the money is talking when you diversify. Like the money is there if they do.
What I'm saying is,
to Javier's point.
If it was, we wouldn't need mandates, right? That's what I'm saying. People would see it. I've seen the studies as well, but no one is doing it.
It's not just that, is what I'm saying, right? Because the money, if like Javier said, they're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart, right? They still going to get paid, and then with their board being diverse, they're going to get paid even more. And but making the move had to come from someone saying we should. It's not even the mandates. The mandates are not even that great without accountability. So I think mandates, incentives, and accountability kind of have to go hand in hand in a way. And almost in a way, when we talk about it in this way, where it's like having a woman on your board means that you could do blah, it's still an incentive. It's an incentive and it's a mandate. right? There's really a thin line in
Yeah, I
between
think I
those
see that.
two, because at the end of the day, it's going to mandate you, but your incentive is that your incentive to follow the mandate, other than you having to shell out some capital that you may not want to shell out, is that you're going to have this woman on your board and you're going to make more money. Like, what you're doing there is changing their mind. It's not a money
So
conversation.
I get it.
Right?
I mean, what you're saying is if you have women on boards and there's more evidence that that actually increases the returns and so on, the more people act like this. So I do agree with that. And I do think it's a fine line between a mandate and an incentive. I completely agree with that. I'm talking about incentives. For example, a whole bunch of foundation endowments recently announced that they are going to allocate X percentage of their endowments to be managed by diverse fund managers. And I think that's fantastic, right? And their boards are holding them accountable to that, the decision makers at those endowments. That's the kind of incentives I'm talking about and kind of things that you can do, as opposed to the government mandating you must do A, B, or C. That's kind of the difference I was trying to strike.
I think Agnes, one thing, for example, I'm not saying this was discussed in the transition, but one thing you can envision is the opportunity zone law to channel capital to the 8,600 or so, whatever zip codes that are, deemed to be less capitalized. You could essentially juice up that tax credit if it's majority minority. That's an incentive, right? Look, my sense is on the numbers, and I've written about this, I've talked about this when NAIC, which they represent it's the largest association of venture capital and private equity, Black and brown managed. And they do study after study that IRRs, ROIs, and these are companies that are not just on the fringe. This is like Vista Equity Partners, which manages $80 billion and all these things. They're way outperforming forget the benchmark. They're way outperforming the quartiles they're in. When I ran the SBIC program, and this is probably an even better data set because it's since 1958, 2,200 funds that have invested in hundreds of thousands of American businesses. I said, well, I have the data. I'm going to look at it. And I did a study with Congress. And guess what? We discovered a few things. One, that when there's at least one woman or one person of color writing checks, more women or people of color get funded, empirically proven. Second, on net IRRs, gross IRRs don't matter. On net, what you're going to return to your investors, diverse fund managers actually outperform investors, everything else, the general pool of investors, everything else being equal. I'm not saying that any one group is better than the other. I'm saying that this is the issue of diversity actually produces numbers. Those numbers are in plain sight. Nobody's acting. So in my view, maybe the sledgehammer needs to be covered in velvet so it looks cute, but you need to punch people in the face. And because the numbers alone are not doing it. Now it'll be interesting to see what Gensler presumably does at the SEC, because there's fighting about the NASDAQ thing. It'll be interesting to see whoever takes over the OCC, what they're going to do with the CRA, the community. To those in the audience that may not know, this Community Reinvestment Act has been one of the biggest tools to get money into communities around the country by incenting banks. So I do agree, Agnes, that that incentives are better than mandates, because mandates just feel bad. It's like, I don't want to. And also, if you're the beneficiary of a mandate, you're always going to be like, well, was I a favor? I don't want to feel like I was a favor. I want to feel somebody gave me the bat and I took a swing and I had a better hit. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think, some of the things that I see happening around this is when you have the mandate that comes out, even with all the small business mandates, or designations, it's like, oh, we couldn't find them. It was nothing we could do. We just did, and it's like, what? Did you look? And then there's this separation in between getting to be visible to those people, right? Like the work that we do at Black Girl Ventures, I have to strategically and purposefully say, who do I need to become visible to? I don't have the luxury of just doing a great job, right? Like, I mean, like, you know, I'm gonna do a great job. We got amazing receipts about everything that we've done. You know, amazing impact metrics and things that we can share. And that's just fine. But I have to get visible to the people that you're about with the endowment. And for whatever reason, you got to get into the newspaper, the specific old journal that they read. You know, like getting in front of these people is work by itself, right? So I think there's like a lot of the systems happening. There's like a lot of the groundswell happening. And there's just like this hole in the middle visibility when it comes to this, because then there's visibility around like who's well vetted. Large corporation that we're working with, here is some back end conversations about like how they got to work with us. Somebody in the meeting asked the question, but do they have the capacity to work with us? Now here we are, you know, working with some of the largest companies in the world. You know, we're across 12 cities. We're rocking and rolling. They, you know, they had already funded us once. And then the question was about this one person, right? Could have just, thank God that the other people were like, what? Of course they do. You know, but this one person could have determined our whole fate. And I think like that's just so huge. It's so make or break in the deep end of the conversations that we don't always know are happening. So we wonder, like, why didn't this thing move? You know, you said you were going to give this capital. Why didn't you give it? It's because two people had doubt in a small business. Two people had doubt in a woman because she's a woman. Two people had doubt in the African American because they didn't have the patience to see whether or not it would work. So the patient capital, the public-private partnerships, the other ways to fund, you know, small businesses, which I agree, because we're an alternative funder, are huge right now for what it means to push businesses forward.
I think that's where the government actually has a huge role. So, you know, going back to my experience in developing countries with the US government, where, you know, if we wanted to lend to more women-owned businesses, if we wanted the local banks to lend to more women-owned businesses, we would, I wouldn't say banks, because banks are not a good, microfinance institutions or alternative lenders to go into, you know, we would guarantee that. We would say 80% of your loan, every loan that you make to a woman-owned business, we will guarantee 80%. Do we do that here? I mean, we do it around the SBA, but the SBA mostly works with banks. So we need to think about, and this is going back to Javier's point about the capillaries, how do we support and incentivize big capital to start using those capillaries like Black Girl Ventures and start really scaling that up, because that is what's funding small businesses in the US right now. And that's what's funding diverse businesses. And we built a really great infrastructure, especially during crises, to support the large financial institutions. We need the same thing to support the capillaries, the entire system that's feeding the small business sector as well. So that's where I see a lot of incentives like guarantees, like first loss, grants to help people plan, like you were saying, to actually, some people don't have the capacity because they've been bootstrapping it all their entire life. They might need some money to actually increase their capacity to do things. So that's where I think that the US government has a huge role to play, to actually incentivize private investment and private public partnerships around the building of this capillary system.
Do you think the government should pick winners and losers on where they put their investments, who they put their investments to? Is that a role, or they should just be giving it out in an equitable way?
Well, I think they need guardrails, right? I mean, you always need guardrails. And the government is not, you know, in the business of picking winners and losers, even though they do it all the time. Just because, you know, somebody from the SBA talks about certain business, that business gets a lot more attention, right? So in general, they're picking businesses, and they're picking winners. But in general, I think that what you really need is strong guardrails. And then you need to work closely with the private sector whose interests are aligned with yours, right? So not just anyone, but the people who are funding businesses. If you do set up guardrails around how you assist them, and you assist them and you let them make the investment decisions about the businesses, but you incentivize more capital going there, then I think you could probably avoid the issue of, is the government going to pick winners or losers?
Well, we're almost coming up on time. This has been a really lively discussion, and I really appreciate each of you all for taking the time. Well, we have 1 minute or 2 minutes left. I just want to maybe go around the horn really quick and ask, what gives you hope? Shelley.
Well, like I said, I'm a serial optimist. Having a woman of color VP gives me major hope. Looking at some of the ways that the current administration is thinking about incentivizing and working with people gives me hope. My community gives me hope. They are rocking and rolling, resilient. They have ingenuity, regardless of what comes or doesn't come. We're going to keep pushing. So every time I see them, talk to them, have a competition, listen to their stories, I am fueled to continue to push.
Agnes?
I think what gives me hope is that every day I'm speaking to people who are trying to work on this issue, and they're really smart people. And they know what the issues are, and they're trying to address them. They're not just kind of writing papers about them. They're really people like Shelley, who are actually trying to deliver capital where she believes will be best used to really create equitable economic growth, which is, I think, what we're all striving for. So the fact that there is a lot of amazing people really putting huge efforts into the space is incredibly hopeful.
And Javier?
What they both said. And I'm hopeful that we'll get out of this crappy pandemic and we can do this in person, because I think I've actually gotten some brain damage out of all these Zooms. So I am hopeful that the pandemic will end. In a more serious note, obviously, you know what side of the political aisle I'm on, but I think what the last administration showed was that the divisions in our country are not what they used to be. The R's versus D's, red versus, very, very different now. And that is that disruption is a huge opportunity for all of us, especially the government, to think about how to best serve our communities. Because if you really, really, really look at the underlying problems that afflict most disenfranchised people, they unite disparate amount of people more than separate us. So I am hopeful that all of this disruption we're going through now, which is horrendous, actually has a silver lining on the other end.
I think we all can hope for that as well. Well, thank you all each. Thank you, Shelley, Javier, Agnes, each of you for participating in our 8th Dialogue for Change. Please look forward to some follow-up emails from Invariant with more details about the Dialogue for Change speaker series and for additional anti-racism resources. You can also find us on Twitter @Invariant and on LinkedIn. And just a special thank you for joining us today, and wishing you all a very terrific end and hopefully safe and not too snowy day here in Washington, D.C. Thank you all.